economic crisis, the insecurity, the inflation, the governments are not doing well. And these are the reasons why the whole president of the Africans need to come together. Let me put it in the way, there are certain countries that are not really cooperating.
They never understand it. It's Jimmy Whitey.
Good morning and welcome to Jimmy White TV podcast. It's a lovely morning and bright Sunday morning. I don't know how it is in your own country, but right here is coming up lovely today. We are still in the breeze of the summer and mingling with the cold a little bit and getting into the cold. There are things that are really going on around the world, and this is an annual thing that always, bring the world together. I so love it when this thing come up. When it come up, I so love it. It's just that when I got the clips, I was a little bit busy, but it was something that I've been intending, I've been waiting for such a thing to, and take place so we can hear each summit, what each and everyone, each president, each from each country, the pains, what they really want, what they see, how they want the United Nations, to see the world and find a lasting solution to poverty, to insecurity, to so many things that are going to be discussed in that place. But this time around, I'm going to bring in up the Ghana president because I was looking at what he was saying, and I feel he said something that, but I will come up with different of the president. But for now, I'll be going with the Ghana president. I want us to see what the Ghana president is saying, what he said, and how he addressed the United Nations. And after that, we will, talk about it. And I'll see you after this video.
We will hear an address by His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, President of the Republic of Ghana. I request protocol to escort His Excellency and invite him to address the Assembly.
Thank you, Madam President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. At this 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly, I'd like to speak about Africa's role in the future of this organization. However, it's impossible to do that without first considering the collective role that Africa played in its founding, which was small and relatively insignificant. Of the 51 member states involved in the founding of the United Nations in 1945, only 4 were African: Egypt, Ethiopia, Liberia, and South Africa. It is important to point out that the United Nations came into being in the aftermath of World War II because of the inability of its predecessor, the League of Nations, to avert a large-scale global conflict, which had been its guiding purpose when it was founded in 1920 at the end of the First World War. Out of the 42 founding member states of the League of Nations, only 3 were African: Liberia, the Union of South Africa, and Ethiopia. Egypt was to join later in 1937. Africa's overall participation in the organization's founding was minimal and relatively unimportant. That's because before all the other talks and meetings, representatives from a group of 40 nations gathered in Berlin for a series of discussions that began in 1884 and which led to the partitioning and formal colonization of the African continent, which is also called the Scramble for Africa. It has famously been written that past is prologue. Well, in the past, the majority of the 54 nations that now comprise Africa were never offered a seat at the table where plans for a new world order were being drawn. But, Madam President, as fate would have it, the tables are turning, and Africa's role in the authorship of whatever is yet to come for this world is going to be huge, and it will be consequential. According to this organization's own projections, by the year 2050, more than 25% of the world's population is expected to come from the African continent. Additionally, by 2050, 1/3 of all young people aged between 15 to 24 will be residing on the African continent. So you see, the future of this world is African. Allow me to say this once again a little louder for those of you in the back. The future is African. Already today, Africa is a catalyst for human potential and development, as well as for economic reform and ecological stability. Africa is a catalyst for systemic change. If this reality, which is fact-based and straightforward, seems provocative or unsettling, perhaps it's because you are viewing it through the lens of centuries of filters, colonialism and imperialism, and the resulting implicit bias. Maybe you are unaware of the resilience of African nations or their remarkable ability to make a strong comeback just when you think it's safe to count them out. That is what is happening right now in my own country, Ghana. Our constitution limits leaders to 2 4-year terms. In January, I was sworn in for a second term, which, let me point out, was non-consecutive with my first term. Our currency, the Ghana cedi, was rapidly depreciating, faced with rising inflation, a huge debt burden, and low morale amongst our citizens. My new administration settled down quickly and embarked on an ambitious program of comprehensive transformation designed to restructure Ghana's economic foundation and enhance our competitive standing globally. We refer to this process of recalibration as our reset agenda. In just 8 months, we have achieved significant reduction in inflation from 23.8% in December 2024 to 11.5% in August 2025, restoring price stability for our citizens. Additionally, our currency, the Ghana cedi, has appreciated considerably against other currencies, with Bloomberg reporting it as the best performing currency in the world at one point. Our improved sovereign credit rating reflects increasing investor confidence in our economy. And our 24-hour economy initiative promises to transform our economy. And there's a renewed willingness amongst our people to trust that their elected officials have Ghana's interests at heart and that we're progressing together. Madam President, I believe that in honor of this milestone celebration, the United Nations should also embark on a process of serious recalibration and establish its own reset agenda. Since the organization's founding, the number of UN member nations has nearly quadrupled. And quite frankly, it is not the same world that it was back then when the UN was formed. I mentioned earlier that I began my second non-consecutive term as president this past January. My first term ended in January 2017. In that span of time, 8 years, the world has changed with such ferocity. My first days in office after my return felt as though I had just awakened from a Rip Van Winkle-style sleep. Now, no, that was only after 8 years. Imagine then what it will be like after 80 years since the founding of the United Nations. In 1945, the sun had not yet set on the largest empire in history. The most common mode of international travel was by sea. The personal computer had not been invented, let alone made portable. And television, a new convenience, was still in its infancy, albeit in black and white color. Relations between the US and the Soviet Union were turning frosty, with Winston Churchill declaring that an iron curtain has descended across the European continent. Fast track 80 years on, in today's world, hundreds of thousands of commercial flights take off and land every day. Libraries have been digitized so that volumes of literature can exist on a small device, small enough to fit inside your pocket. We live in a world of cryptocurrency, artificial intelligence, social media, the internet and its dark hidden dungeon of the dark web, all of which carry a potential threat to global peace and security. Climate change is real, and we're fighting a losing battle against the loss of Maldives and other island nations to the rising sea level, against the loss of Timbuktu to desertification and the Amazon forest to global warming and deforestation. Madam President, the UN Founding Charter is outdated when it comes to representation in this August Assembly. The most powerful post-World War II nations are still being rewarded with an almost totalitarian guardianship over the rest of the world. And yet, the first sentence in Chapter 2, Article 1 of the UN Charter declares that the organization is based on the principle of sovereign equality of all its members. If this were true, and was the case, a continent as large as Africa, with its numerous UN member states, would have at least one permanent seat on the Security Council. Furthermore, we believe that veto power should not be restricted to only 5 nations, nor should it be absolute. There must be a mechanism in this House for the General Assembly to challenge a veto. No single nation should be able to exercise an absolute veto to serve its own interests in a dispute. In 1995, during the 50th anniversary of the United Nations, Nelson Mandela stood in this very spot, and he said, the United Nations has to reassess its role, redefine its profile, and reshape its structures. It should truly reflect the diversity of our universe and ensure equity among the nations in the exercise of power within the system of international relations in general, and the Security Council in particular. I close quotations. 30 years later, we African leaders are still making the same simple request for a permanent seat on the Security Council with the power of a veto. So today, Madam President, I stand here in this exact spot and ask the world, if not now, then when? We demand not only a reform of the Security Council, but also a reset of the global financial architecture, which is currently rigged against Africa. Africa must have a greater say in the world's multilateral financial institutions. And while I'm making requests, I'd like to call for the removal of the blockade on Cuba. As Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, our nation's founder, famously said, we seek to be friends with all and enemies to none. The Cuban people shed their blood on African soil in the fight against apartheid. And indeed, Cuba has been and continues to be a faithful friend of Africa. You see, the very fact that I can stand here and ask these things and say these things, and the fact that all nations can ostensibly gather here to address critical global issues, air our grievances, and express our concerns, that is what makes the survival of this organization so important. In every old city or village, you will find a town square, or a courtyard, or a plaza that once served as a gathering space for the citizens of the community and their leaders. Meetings and celebrations were held there, as were trials and elections. And these were spaces that brought people together and held them together as a community. Sadly, time and technology have eroded these spaces. Madam President, in many ways, the United Nations is the proverbial town square of our modern global village. And it has never been more critical for us to protect this one space that brings and holds the world nations together as a community. The internet, social media platforms, and artificial intelligence offer us the illusion of connectivity, when in fact what they do is reinforce isolation by using algorithms that ensure that we do not receive new ideas and perspectives, but rather more of the same content. We are served alternative facts and manipulated images, making it easy to disseminate disinformation and sow seeds of division amongst communities. Madam President, these are dangerous times. Our world is currently experiencing a rise in nationalism and economic instability. There's a general breakdown of multilateralism. Various acts of aggression have been committed against the sovereignty of others, and nations are attempting to circumvent the very safeguards that were put in place to prevent large-scale global conflict. These conditions are all too similar to the ones that led to the League of Nations' failure in fulfilling its mandate. The denial of visas to President Abbas and the Palestinian delegation sets a bad precedent and should be deeply worrying to all member nations of the United Nations. Ghana recognized the state of Palestine in 1988 and supported a two-state solution to the conflict since then. And I say, contrary to the claims of some, a two-state solution would not be a reward for Hamas. It would rather be a reprieve for the hundreds of thousands of innocent women and children and people who are facing collective punishment and forced starvation for no reason other than the fact that they are Palestinian. For nearly 2 years and for the fear of reprisals, we here in this General Assembly have been playing hide and seek with language to find the right words to help us avoid or excuse what we all know is taking place in Gaza. But here's the thing, it doesn't matter what you call it. If it looks like a duck, it swims like a duck, and quacks like a duck, well, then it must be a duck. The crimes in Gaza must stop. The crimes in Gaza must stop. Madam President, I also want to draw particular attention to the conflict in Sudan, which this body has described as the world's largest humanitarian crisis. 12 million people have had to flee their homes. And when we speak of migration, we refer to the 12 million new Sudanese refugees, whom we as a global community should be willing to assist in much the same way that many member nations readily assisted new refugees coming out of Ukraine. Let's dispense with the euphemisms and dog whistles and speak frankly. It is not a mystery that when leaders of Western nations complain of their migration problems, they are often referring to immigrants from the global south. But many of those immigrants are climate refugees. And interestingly, the global north emits 75% more greenhouse gases than the global south. However, the effects of climate change are more severe in the global south because we lack the resources to address them effectively. And so when the desert encroaches on our villages and towns and they become unlivable, we are forced to flee. Wasan Shire, a Somali-born prophet, a Somali-British poet born in Kenya to Somalian refugee parents, was London's first youth poet laureate. She writes in her poem titled Home. And it says, you have to understand that no one puts their children in a boat unless the water is safer than the land. No one bends their palms under trains beneath carriages. No one spends days and nights in the stomach of a truck feeding on newspaper unless the miles traveled mean something more than just a journey. Madam President, we cannot normalize cruelty. We cannot normalize hatred. We cannot normalize xenophobia and racism. If we're going to tell a story, let's not tell it slant. Let's tell all the truth. When we speak of migrants, we speak of Mami Ewusi Mensah Frimpong, a judge on the U.S. District Court for the Central District of California. She's the first black female judge on any of California's 4 federal district courts. She was born here in America to immigrant parents from Ghana. We speak of Peter Bosman, a medical doctor in Ghana who moved to the town of Piran in Slovenia in the 1980s and later became the first black mayor of Piran, the first black mayor in Slovenia and in the whole of Eastern Europe. We speak of T. Michael, the iconic Ghanaian Norwegian artist and designer. And of course, we speak of the late Kofi Annan, former United Nations Secretary General. Former United Nations Secretary General and Nobel Peace Prize recipient, who was born in Ghana, but spent his adulthood in various places in America and Europe. These are people who have brought great distinction to the countries that they decided to call home. Just as the migrants and the children of migrants before them did, I dare say, these are not invaders. These are not criminals. Madam President, the slave trade must be recognized as the greatest crime against humanity. As the African champion on reparations, Ghana intends to introduce a motion in this August body to that effect. More than 12.5 million Africans were forcibly taken against their will and transported to create wealth for the powerful Western nations. We must demand reparations for the enslavement of our people and the colonization of our land that resulted in the theft of our natural resources, as well as the looting of artifacts and other items of cultural heritage that have yet to be returned in total. We recognize the value of our land and the value of our lives, as did our colonizers, as well as the governments that happily paid reparations to former slave owners as compensation for the loss of their property, in quotes. And that property for which they received compensation was paid, referred to enslaved people who had been freed. Madam President, an increasingly insecure world is witnessing upward spending on defense budgets of bilateral partners and steep cuts in official development assistance. Since July 2024, it is estimated that there's been a 40% drop in humanitarian aid globally. In this era of global uncertainty, Africa must exercise sovereignty over its natural resources to raise the necessary funds to ensure the well-being of its citizens. The days of parceling out vast concession areas to foreign interests for exploitation must come to an end. We'll continue to welcome foreign investment, but we must negotiate better for a bigger share of the natural resources that belong to us. And we must insist on value addition to these resources. We're tired of the continued image of poverty-stricken, disease-ridden rural communities living at the periphery of huge foreign-controlled natural resource concession areas. We're tired of having people extract the most they can from us and in return offer us the very least by way of respect, consideration, and dignity. We're tired of not being represented in ways that reveal the richness and complexity of our history or acknowledge all that we have overcome to arrive here in this liminal space of untold possibilities. Allow me to echo the Indian-American writer Arundhati Roy, who wrote, "Another world is not only possible, she's on her way. On a quiet day, I can hear her briefing." I want to add that for the sake of Africa, and quite selfishly for the sake of my 18-year-old daughter, I hope that this new world that is arriving is a place of safety and equality for women and girls. To succeed, we must empower everyone, including women and girls, to reach their full potential. In closing, Madam President, I'd like to congratulate you on your election to preside over this historic 80th General Assembly and on being the 5th woman to hold this distinction. I'd also like to congratulate Her Excellency Nana Jane Opoku-Agyeman on being the first woman Vice President of Ghana. Now every Ghanaian girl knows the heights to which she can ascend. Words matter, but issues of representation matter even more, which is why Ghana looks forward to the appointment of a woman as Secretary General of this organization in the near future. Madam President, Your Excellencies, I thank you for your kind attention.
Wow, that was a good address, you know. You see what the Ghana president, how he addressed. And I was so happy he was not even looking at the paper. He was just pouring at the mind, saying so many things that were coming up. I'm going to be picking it one after the other. I want to go to the straight of the immigration aspect of it. It is true that a lot of diaspora now are really taking off Africans from the country. And that needs to be addressed. And I was so happy the way that he addressed it, that definitely they know that Africans are part of the development of diasporas, of so many diasporas countries today, which I don't want to mention the name of any country, but they know themselves. And because of the slave trade, and that was criminality a long time ago, though we didn't know it as criminal those days, but a lot of Africans were taken up to diaspora and use them to develop their country, make it worthy, and so many of them have, had children die, become, before the nationalization, the envision of slave trade. But there was a lot of suffering, there was a lot of tragedy, there was a lot of things that they went through, a lot of them. And because of that, not only that, a lot of things was taken out from Africa to diasporas, but their craft, so many things were taken away. And these are most reason why diasporas, those countries that did it, should look away. Yeah, they should look away and allow the Africans to enjoy what should have been with them. Yeah, to enjoy it, because, and if you look at what he was saying, that the future is from African, and it's true. A lot of Africans, there's production of children are really, there's increase of population, because Africans love to have children. You see in one house, you see about 8 children, you see, and that are the most reason why there should be more support to the African, because the Africans are passing through a lot of, sufferings, a lot of inflation, a lot of things, which, if these things are not being taken away from them, they should be well to do. But my advice to the African government, presidents, and the leaders of Africans, because there are certain countries that are not, because, let me put it in a way, there are certain countries that are not really cooperating. Just like you have the United Nations, we have the African summit where they, meet up, they should be cooperative, because Africans has failed to understand that we still have, though a lot of things was taken away, though our people were taken, the manpower was reduced, a lot of things yet, but Africans still have a good land. Africans can still produce. But a lot of Africans, because of the change of, I would say the change of the world has changed a lot. There's a lot of internet, there's a lot of, we are in a global world. So farming has really been looked away. I think so, farming has been looked away. And not that farming has been looked away, I will put it in different way, because in Nigeria, why the farmers are not really going, because there's what they call the Fulani henchmen who comes, that is where we go to the insecurity aspect, who comes to divert those people, by kidnapping them, by buying them, a lot of things which are going on. And I know it's also going on in other countries like Somalia, like Sudan, where there is a lot of things now going on because of the economic crisis, the insecurity, the inflation. The governments are not doing well, and these are the reasons why the whole president of the Africans need to come together in a summit to speak to themselves that it is time to stop looting. It is time to stop doing all those things that are making the economies not go forward, which we all know: insecurity, inflation, looting, bribing, and so many things, not balancing the equation of the country. It is time. And if African leaders can say, okay, we are stopping, and they come together, they can treat together. they can trade together, exchange of trading, sell things together, this thing, do import together, do business together, and strengthen their currencies. Yes, strengthen it in the international market. It's boom, let's buy together, let's do trade together, let's come together. Boom, 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 they start doing it with clear, open transparency, making sure that there is employment, and that will create a lot of employment in Africa, because and open doors for immigrants to go through. Anyone that want to transport to this country and look at for, not that they will not look at for criminal, because there's some people that won't take advantage of it, yes, but look at for people that are assaulting, people that are trying to use it for slave trade, for all those assault, anything that is criminology. Open the borders. Yeah, open the borders for Africans to go through easily without any disruption. But they should put securities. No check, but not a hard check, but just for knowing whether you are right or you're not right. But you should be allowed to trade, to do this thing, to extend your trade. You know, that way they strengthen this to do the roads, do train, do everything that can transfer from to each and different African country. Yeah, the whole leaders can go to, and put the money together. And this country bring this one, bring this one, bring this one, go do anyone, the small one, they feed them according to their strength of the country. If Nigeria is a high, they bring this one, bring this one, bring. That's how they put the money, and billions of dollars, and the two things that will connect for doing of their business for. This is how diasporas. That is how that's how they prosper. They do business together a lot. They do things together a lot. That's why they prosper. For Africans, the problem of Africa is that they want to do business with diasporans. And why them within themselves? It's only few people, few Africans that are like interacting with business. The rest just want to, they feel that this currency, no, you can strengthen, they can strengthen the currency and make African currency to be good. Yeah, powerful, very strong. Like if you go to diaspora now, each diaspora you enter now, their currency is strong. Though it might not be bigger than, it might be, British might be greater than Eastern Europe, but they use euro. We can turn African money to be one and strengthen it. Yeah, turn the African money to be one. It's up Naira to be here, this one, the Ghana, we turn it to find one name and turn that African money to be one, that everywhere you go in Africa, that is what you use. They strengthen it and it becomes strong. That when you travel out of the country, you know, you will not even want to travel because everything is working fine. Listen, if Africa work very fine, if you go to, listen, they know why I'm saying this, because I've traveled to so many African countries and I've seen beauty in Africa, man. Africa is very beautiful. God, if you go to some country in Africa, like Ivory Coast, Congo, go to places, go to South Africa and go to, you know, whoa, go to African country, you see beauty, man. Beautiful places in Africa, I say, whoa. Then places, when I went to Egypt, I did Cairo, I said, whoa, is this African? So beautiful, so lovely, it look like this place I am, there's no different way. Man, listen, like Africa is very beautiful. Come to Nigeria, if you go to a place in Nigeria and say, wow, is this African? Yeah, African, because African have good weather, have everything. You know, African can stand. But it's just because of this unity, oneness, this one rather, it is diaspora that creating the United Nations. It is not even from Africa that created it. From diaspora, they created United Nations and say, let's unite everyone together. You see how the diaspora and they think. The day that Africa will start thinking like the diasporas, the way they unite, they say, the way they always want to help themselves, that way, Nigeria, they say the Africa will be a better place. Africa is so lovely. Yeah, and there's, in the future, I've decided in the future, I've been planning to travel from one African country to another country and shooting and talking about the history of each African. And I'm going to start it from my country, Nigeria. From this time, I'm going to start shooting Nigeria, the beauty of Nigeria, traveling places, talking about Nigeria, how Nigeria look like, how beautiful Nigeria is. Yeah. And from there, I'll move to other countries, how beautiful Africa is. Africa is a very beautiful place. Africa is a place that people need to see. There's a guy here that always shows Africa. A lot of it. Africa is, if you move to, Africa is very beautiful, man. Africa is beautiful. If you have money, do good business, do this thing, you won't want to live in diaspora, you want to live in another place, you want to be in, because it has sunshine, everything, natural resources, everything that you need to live. Anyway, I don't want to keep this video for too long. I just want you to feel that yes, the Ghana president, kudos to you for what you have said, and I want to know, and also want to ask, I hope you are going to settle the one that is happening in your country, because within your Nigerian and Ghana, you see what Ghana is trying to also send Nigerian out, and these are the things that we do not want in Africa. We need oneness. So you need to speak to your people and address them this way. Let them know that yes, we all African need ourselves. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this show. I am always your boy Jimmy White, and I will see you in the next update. Thank you very much and happy Sunday.